And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Global Citizens. My name is Calvin. I am the show's host, and I am, of course, his creator. So we are back, and today is actually my brain baby's second anniversary. I've done this surprisingly for 2 years with an incredibly crappy laptop that I took from my ex boss who didn't give me my last salary back then. And when the first time I did that, the quality was so bad, but survived until now. So hooray to me and hooray to global citizens and yay for third culture kids, I guess. All right. So my guest for today has actually made an appearance in my last episode and my milestone episode 100. She is okay. Just a little bit of rectification. She's actually a lot younger than what I was joking about at that time. But hey, this is my show. I can do whatever I want. So yeah. So my guest today was a panelist on my 100 milestone episode. Is Li Wei Rong, and she will be talking about her startup Raw Culture, which just opened up to community for youth TCKs around 18 to 24. Yeah, I'm no longer around that age, so it's good. With the
Oh,
mission of creating a community where you can share your cultural stories as a TCK. So without further ado, Wei Rong, how are you?
well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be back. Thank you for, having me on this show. And this time it's a bit different because as you mentioned before, last time I was with all of you guys, it was the 100th episode, so it was also very exciting. But now like I get to have a more personal conversation and discussion, I guess. So honestly, very excited. Thank you again for having me and really excited to share more about my story and experience.
You're very, very welcome. All right, for those of you who is just tuning in for the very first time, Global Citizens is an online platform whereby I invited individuals who has lived the life of a global citizens. Primarily, I represent TCKs, third culture kids. Reason simply because, well, I'm a little biased on this since I'm one. However, I have represented people who has lived this kind of lifestyle, such as a global nomad, an expatriate, or even international speakers who need to travel to different places quite often and spend a considerable amount of time there. The reason being is that I want people to understand that this intercultural life is not an extended holiday. It's not a vacation whereby you spend every single night in a hotel, whereby you can just take an Instagram story just to promote what you are doing. Because this is a life whereby you need to be a chameleon. You need to adapt not only how you speak, you need to adapt who you are internally, and sometimes, well, I do have cases before whereby I heard people has to change externally in order to fit in with the surroundings. So I hope with by doing this, people understands more what is the importance of intercultural communication and at the same time to be more understanding. So without further ado, I'll pass the spotlight back to Wei Rong. All right, Wei Rong, I hope I've done enough justice in your introduction. Is there anything I'm missing?
No, no, you did everything perfectly. Don't worry about it. Everything's
Oh,
fine. Yeah.
oh, wonderful. Okay, if there's anything wrong, I will just edit it out. Don't worry. You already are acquainted with my editor, so yeah.
Sure.
If anything, just let him know what you need to what you
Sounds
need to
good.
edit. All right, all right, very wrong. So your first question is, I am so sorry because it's a traditional for TCK. Please define home for you. Is it more to the people or the location itself?
So I'm not sure if you remember, but last time you actually asked the same question in the 100th episode, and I don't think anything changed. Um, but I will say it again because I think it's very important, and I feel like some people may also kind of like understand what I might also be feeling at this moment. And for me, it's always been more of an emotion. It's never been like a location attachment. It's not that, hey, because I'm in Hungary location wise, I feel like this is my home. Even though, by the way, my background is I grew up and was raised in Hungary for basically my entire life. And I attended international school for 18 years. And currently I should be in Austria. I am not because of COVID. So I'm in Hungary. little background story there. So in terms of like what I said, I definitely think that it's not attached to the location wise. For home, for me, it's definitely an emotion and who you're surrounded with and what you're comfortable in, right? So if, for example, I feel comfortable with, my family being in China or meeting somebody in Singapore, but I'm very close to them, the person that I'm meeting with, they give me the emotion of being home and they give me the emotion that I can be comfortable and be myself. So honestly, I think it's much more of an emotion for me rather than like being a location bound, situation. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, fair enough. I just want to refresh that particular questions is because, well, it's been a while. It's a month. It's been a month. So,
Sure.
uh, yeah, I mean, it's always good to always refresh why definition
Definitely.
of home because everybody has a different interpretation of it. Like if you ask Sarah, who was part of the 100 episode, to Sarah, she's felt most comfortable on a boat because that's where she grew up most of her life. So
Mm-hmm.
that is something that I want people to understand is because a lot of time this is something that I am actually working on. It's an article I'm finishing soon, but it's just that I tend to have a bad habit of procrastinating a little bit when it's gonna finish. Since I thought, okay, it's gonna finish anyway. A lot of times is because we tend to have a little bit of a bias look for our location. Like for me, I
Mm-hmm.
always prefer to be in Singapore most of the time, and for that, whereas I am experiencing that a lot of time in Indonesia, there are times like maybe it is actually not such a huge proportion, but the thing is that you kind of blow it up, and in the end, you kind of affected your mood. So this is something that I hope people can have their own way of interpreting it, and it doesn't mean that you have to be biased on one of the homes that you grew up in.
Definitely.
Uh,
And something
yeah,
to add there, like I feel like in general, not only TCKs, but I feel like a lot of people have this decision making anxiety where they feel like they need to choose one place they are bound to or one place that feels like home. And I feel like if there wasn't this, then they would have a much more freer option or have a much more open mindset into being more in a way creative with what makes them feel like they belong, right? And so I feel like in terms of like this choice making, I think it's something that's really bound into human nature to always feel like you need to categorize everything and to make sense of it through this categorization. So I just want people to I just want people to be aware that there are people like me and also like Calvin, wait, this way, and other people who, they recognize that you can be consistent of different cultures and, you don't need to be bounded by just one categorization of where you come from, right? And that's also like my reference to location. It doesn't need to be bounded by location. It could be something with emotions or perhaps like spiritual. Anything could be a possibility. Yeah.
fair enough, fair
Sorry
enough.
about the noise there.
No
Okay.
worries, no worries. So, okay, let me just refresh in a bit. Yeah, you are originally, of course, from China. You went to an international school at Austria, was it? Or was it
In
Budapest?
Hungary. In Hungary.
Hungary.
Yeah,
Okay, Budapest.
Budapest.
Okay. So you are now currently in Austria, and you are supposed to be back to
The
where
other way
again?
around. The other
Okay,
way around.
okay. Maybe you can explain that later on. I will just
Sure.
ask this question then. What was the moving process been for you when you have to transition to this different homes? And
Mm.
along with that, though, do you ever feel that this moving process, in a sense, is even though it's nowhere near the level of pain, but do you ever feel that it's kind of like a mourning process in a sense because there's the different steps that you have to take in order for you to acclimatize to that new home and to accept that your situation, your circumstances has changed?
Hmm. So I definitely say that my moving experience in comparison to, standard TCK experiences might be a bit more sedentary because I was basically I am. I mean, I'm still am, but I'm basically in Hungary for the majority of my life. So I didn't really move around after a couple of years. I was the majority wise in Hungary. And I would say, actually, metaphorically, me moving around, I wouldn't even refer back to me moving from Hungary to Austria, but it was more so my mental moving around when I was dealt with different cultures. For example, when I was in Hungary, I felt this moving around when, for example, I would go to school, to an American international school, and then after that whole entire day, I would come back to my Chinese parents. And that would be a moving around for me because I would need to basically put myself and adapt myself into a completely different mindset, because the way that you express yourself or communicate or interact in the international American system is much more different than how I talk to my Chinese parents, who are in a more and more traditional, right? And so, one example is that, I would sometimes come home from school and I would be in this American mindset, so to say, and I would just like talk perhaps a bit too directly to my parents, and they would be very shocked. They're like, "Whoa, wait, can you say that again?" Not in a good way. And I'm like,
Go to your room, young lady.
like, honestly, like, when I say things directly, I don't mean that it's like a negative direct. It might even be a positive direct, but they kind of be taken aback that I am so straightforward with how I think, right? And for me, that was my moving process where I had to always filter myself in a way, filter a little bit of how I act when I am placed in a different situation, even in one day, right? So that was a majority of how I felt of transitioning always, like constantly every single day. And also taking in that there were other people from other nationalities in the school as well, right? So that was also different on how I interacted with perhaps my other peers and also my other teachers who came from different places. So that was a different story. But in terms of like my moving from Hungary to Austria, it wasn't so much of a big difference because generally I have a feeling that in Europe there's somewhat big similarities, right? So I wasn't like moving from Hungary to New York or Hungary to Singapore. It was kind of not of a big difference or a big gap, I would say. But I would say I had a once again movement in my mindset, which is I was put in the position of kind of being with myself for the first time, like moving out of my parents' home, right? Moving out of that traditional like Chinese home in a way. And that kind of gave me the ability and flexibility to kind of think through my identity. So in a way that actually helped me a lot because I wasn't confronted with multiple identities, but I was able to digest all of these experiences that I had when I grew up and how I want to deal with that, right? And I had more of a freedom of who I hang out with, what kind of a group of people I kind of put myself in, because I wasn't just put in the high school that my parents wanted me to go, but I could choose, right? And so I felt like that really helped me in my own understanding and also like coming to today of how I then led me to create raw culture, which I'm sure I can discuss a bit later on. Yeah.
Fair enough about that. Yeah, a word of advice. You are now, how young are you again? 22, right?
21.
Oh my God. Okay, wow, you break the record for the show again. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
yay.
I think the youngest was it 22? Was it? Okay, sorry. I can't remember about that. I think it should be G1
Sure.
22. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. A word of advice. I'm 28 now. Yeah, everybody knows my age. I already said it several times here, so it's okay. Even after a word of advice, by the time you are my age, please make sure you already have your own home and you are already established enough for it. Because if there's a somehow some mishap whereby you have to move back, that choice that you were craving, that you cherish a lot now, is gone. Seriously, it sucks. So, all right, I'll let you find out about that for later on in case it happened. But moving on.
Cool, cool.
Okay. All right. So of course, we are here today to talk about your startup. So, raw culture, what is about, and this is something that we are both Chinese descent, so this is something that is something in a sense is something symbolic, like a name represents something, right? So
Sure.
I want you to explain how the name came about for rock culture, and what do you hope to accomplish it, and what is it actually at, maybe even though even it could be at its initial stage,
Sure.
or
Do
now
do
it's at,
you mind do you mind if I first explain you the story and then tell you the name? Because I feel like it might make more sense then.
by all means, this is your
Okay,
spotlight.
sure. So, okay, basically what happened was, I mean, you guys already kind of know my background, so I am a TCK myself. I always grew up in kind of like a diverse background and also am very, very privileged to do so. And the whole story was that, I grew up and was raised in Hungary. So basically, I grew up as an Asian in Europe for my entire life. And there were like, some, I would say I had some good experiences, but then there was also some repetitive kind of negative experiences I experienced while being an Asian in Europe. And those kind of triggered me or like kind of stimulated me to think about different things and different topics. So what happened was I had the benefit of growing up multicultural, right? I have the benefit of being able to put myself in different lenses, being able to be very flexible and kind of like in a way chameleon like, depending on what circumstance I was put in. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But there's also some people, and most people actually, who aren't like you, who aren't TCKs, and who grew up monoculturally. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong. But it's just that they have a different, perhaps, mindset and outlook of, of life or on people. And so what I would notice is when, for example, I was in, Hungary, and when I was small and even now, I would go out on a local grocery store or go shopping with my mom in a mall. And there would always be people who would literally, like, even now, just like stop and kind of stare at me. And sometimes they would just stare at me and move on. Or sometimes they would stare and then I could hear them after like we cross, like I could hear them like say, oh, otet kinai, which means in Hungarian, oh, there's a Chinese. And like I'm kind of like used to that in a way, so like it doesn't really bother me right now. But the whole incentive is like, what's the point of saying that? And I feel like we've come into a point in society where I think we've all know there's different nationalities, right? And every single person, not even nationality wise, but their characteristic and personality is different. So, it doesn't really, in my way or perspective, make sense for you to judge someone based on just how they look like. And so, kind of what that story led me to do is basically build a platform called Rock Culture. But even before that, there was like more of a significant event that kind of made me really choose to start this platform. And this was something that happened in Austria, and it was at the beginning of the pandemic. It was around February, and I was heading back to basically my dorm. And, I would take the subway as usual. And when I went into the subway, I saw an empty seat, right? And across from that empty seat, there were two Caucasians. Very normal. So I sat down. But the moment I sat down, the two Caucasians in front of me put their hands to their scarves and lifted up over their nose, like almost simultaneously. I could literally see them across from me doing that simultaneously. And like I kind of know that they don't even know each other, right? And basically that didn't stop from there, because the person who was sitting on the outer edge of the seat, they got up and went to the further side of the subway. And at that point, I was like, whoa, like it's been a long time since I really felt like such an open discrimination in a way. And I just felt kind of like, sad about it, but also just like, whoa, people are still at this stage that they're judging you simply on how you look like. And like the interesting thing is that this was happening in the beginning of February. And this means in Austria, there wasn't even COVID regulations of, for example, face masks. That's why people were wearing scarves. And so, like, the case wasn't even 100% sure, right? And even before then, even in that situation, people already have biases about you. So at that day, on that day after I arrived to my dorm, I didn't feel particularly good about myself, right? I was like, whoa, is it my fault? Should I make myself more white? Should I act in a way that's a bit more different? Should I cover up that I am Asian to fit in and to make people like me in a way? And then I was like, Mimi, Wei Rong. Mimi, by the way, is my nickname. Wei Rong, stop BSing yourself. Like get yourself together. You should be very proud of, coming from different cultures and being able to speak English as your native language while your ethnicity is Chinese. And so after that, I kind of like went through this whole cycle and I thought about, oh my gosh, but you know what? I'm not the only one who's experiencing this. There's others who are also like me, who are TCKs, who may also experience the exact same thing of being misjudged based on simply how they look like and not knowing the whole background story about it. And so that moment during this pandemic and COVID time, it kind of triggered me to start Raw Culture, which is basically a website right now, a web app where people can go and share their cultural stories. And cultural stories, I mean by cultural experiences, for you to understand that person and also their cultural background and how that country traditions, values, customs are like by understanding and reading the stories. And so on the website right now, there are videos with, experts from different disciplines and their talk about culture, but also, for example, in the context of corporate culture. How is that implemented into a business environment, or how are they taking care of that? How are they taking care of their employees, right? And also more closely on the topic of TCKs, them sharing their stories of their background, right? And what they've experienced growing up. Because every single one of those stories, one person at least can connect with that. And if one person can connect, that can help one person, and that's already enough, right? So that's what I started. And right now, at the moment, I'm creating a application actually under that. And I hope to basically bring this TCK community and awareness alive, but also leveraging our strengths of knowing multiple cultures and using our voice to share about our experiences of being in different countries and allowing people who are not TCKs come to the platform and learn about different countries. So that's basically, my stage currently, and it's been honestly a pleasure because I've grown a lot as I've done this, and I've also learned so much. I think I'm gonna leave it like that because I talked a lot. So I also want Calvin to, just take it on.
No worries, no worries. I mean, well, this is why I invited you to talk about yourself. It's fine. First off, I've done this for, as I said, this is my second year as of today. So allow me to applaud you on that, and at a really, really young age, because at 21, I was just still a mess at that time. So kudos to you for being able to have that initiative early on. And earlier you mentioned about that slight doubt, slight anger, and in a sense, slight negative feelings of just being an Asian. This is
Mhm,
not my content actually, but attached in the description box is we need to talk about anti-Asian hate, which was done by the Try Guys during the pandemic some time back. And
mhm,
I permanently put it under some of my banners. The reason being was that I remember that pain myself. I served in Singapore Armed Forces for national service, and at that time, I people used to make fun of me because in a sense, even though I don't try to be, I always try to imitate a more Americanized or more British accent. Is because growing up in Indonesia back then, the only
mhm,
influence of English we have are from American movies. So therefore, that's the only way I know how to imitate how to speak. I imitate Dwayne
mhm,
Johnson, also known as The Rock, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and stuff. So that's how the only way I know how to speak. And people used to make fun of me when I used to live in Singapore because I used this kind of accent, which is deviated away from how people speak there.
mhm,
So when during that this when the whole mess up episode of pandemic started, I remembered I post a picture of the Singapore Armed Forces Rival 21 SAR 21 is because I remember back then I used to carry a gun when I was serving the army, and then it kind of traumatized me in a sense is like because when I used to watch some of as I grow older, I kind of realized that people who look like me are mistreated or looked down upon or be condescended upon. Whether if it's the males, then you are just treated as like a joke or a nerd, or maybe even though it's in a more positive way, I guess if you want to call it, is we are just a kung fu master, but I'm not gonna jump up of a two-story like to another building like Jackie Chan or whatever.
Mhm.
So that's just implausible for one thing. And Asian women who, by the way, if you are one, you would see your mom, your sister, or even your significant others is just treated as a sex object. So when I look at it, it kind of demoralized me, and the realization that at one point, one of a personal source of pride of mine when I received my rifle was that it was like in a sense of trust from my second home, and the fact that it can be used to take the life of somebody who looked like me is something that still haunts me, and which is why even though it might not be what I want to do, and while I still always will primarily focus on TCK, I will put as a way to as a support for the Asian community, I guess, is
Mhm.
because it's really, guys, it's 2021. How long more do you want to, I don't know, you want to keep the
Sure.
resentment from during World War One, from your grandfather's time, or I don't know, there's enough resources now, and if you are not come from a more developed country, I apologize, but there are resources everywhere for you to wake up and see that there are different ways of life, and like it or not, the world is becoming more connected, so you have to catch up with it.
Sure. And I just want to add, like, so for whoever who is seeing this, who perhaps is not a TCK, like these little actions, they actually like genuinely affect a person. And especially when you are in your development stage, right? When you're very young, when you're still in kindergarten or in middle school, like those stages when you feel like somebody is judging you on your identity, which is, based on perhaps your culture or your country, that can make you feel very, very bad and insecure, because you're going to take that personally, right, when you're small, because you can't like really separate those two. And so if somebody kind of judges you based on how you look like, you identify that as they're judging me because I am Calvin or because I am Wei Rong, not because of, the country specifically. But still you feel that judgment, and that affects you really, really a lot when you're small. Because I also had personal experiences with this. And to share like a simple story, which I also, wrote about on my blog on the website, is basically when I was around kindergarten. It was also in Hungary, and what happened was my mom and my sister, were going to the local shopping mall in Hungary, and specifically New Yorker. Back then, it was like all the craze, like like it was so popular, so every single person like went to New Yorker anyway. And basically, we decided to go there for like a little shopping spree and get some. I remember it was like puppy T-shirts, because they were all the rage then. So we decided to go there, and we were like super excited, right? Because we finally could get that puppy T-shirt we wanted for so long, blah blah. And
Was
so
it
we were
Hush Puppy? Was it a
sorry,
Hush Puppy? Is that a Hush Puppy T-shirt? I didn't know it was on the rage back then.
hush
Or
puppy. No,
is
it
it?
was like a French
Oh,
bulldog. I don't. It was like a French bulldog.
my bad. Okay, my
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. Anyway, it's fine. It's just because everybody was wearing it for some reason. Anyway, so basically, my sister and we were like super happy, and we were like hopping into the store, and like we were like, yes, we're finally gonna get the T-shirt. And we first of all like actually went to the sunglass section, because we like to kind of like look around and see what's there. And so we tried on a couple of sunglasses. And then after like trying on a couple of sunglasses after a few minutes or so, there were like footsteps that I heard coming towards us. And when I turned my head, I saw that there were these two Hungarian local kids who were like my age. And they basically kind of like ran up to us and they were like, look at me in Hungarian. And then what they did was they, used their hands and they pulled their, eyes up like this. And I feel like for us Asians, like we know this too well, right? I don't need to describe
Yes,
it,
the
but people
Asian
know.
eyes.
And I experienced this when I was in kindergarten, right? And they were like doing that continuously for at least 4 or 5 rounds until they felt like, oh my gosh, I'm a bit tired, so I'm gonna back off. But my sister and I, like, we were kind of taught in Asian manners to not get like mad at people, right? And to kind of stay calm and be respectful even when you're small. Right? You have that mindset in you. And so I kind of was like in shock, and we literally were like standing there and them kind of like doing that to us the whole entire time. But the really important thing was the kids' parents was standing right behind them. They were standing right behind them when this whole thing happened, and she did not move a little bit. Like she was essentially kind of approving of that and not even budging when this whole thing was happening. And so in that kind, when you see as a child that a parent is confirming an action, you're like, oh my gosh, that's the right thing to do, right? So I felt like, oh my gosh, then people should be doing this to me, right? Like I guess like this is what you should receive when you're an Asian, right? Living in Europe or like in any country. And so I felt like really embarrassed of my nationality, of being Chinese, of growing up in a Chinese environment. I was just embarrassed at that point because I couldn't really understand when I was small. I don't have that, mindset to discern what is right or wrong or what is happening. And so after that, like they left, and yeah, they kind of skipped away and left. And me and my sister, we didn't talk about it. Like we didn't talk about what just happened. We kind of just continued like nothing happened. And I feel like that's also something that was kind of embedded in my, like what my parents would tell me, which is like, don't take things super seriously. Like kind of like, things happen to you, but you got to move on, right? You can't sulk about it. Don't cry. It doesn't make you strong, blah, blah. So I kind of like felt like that was kind of embedded in me. And so that day, like my sister and I didn't talk about it. And I also didn't talk about it to my mom. And we didn't talk about this until literally this year when I wrote the blog out. I never shared this to anybody because I felt like, I should just deal with it. So like stories like this, it was literally when I was in kindergarten, and it still affects me, and I still remember it so clearly. And so I'm just trying to like share this story because I know people also had the same or similar experiences. And I want to tell people that it's not okay. Like when you say it, how old you say it, and what position you are, it's never okay to judge a person based on their race, their nationality, or their religion, anything, right? People have their own experiences, their own stories. Like, who are you to kind of change that for them? So I just wanted to share that story in any way if somebody can resonate with that similar experience. Yeah.
To the two Caucasian, to the two Eurasian in the subway, and the two idiots from your childhood, please wake up. The people with your eyes now are those eyes now are the superpower of the world. So if you want to have a job, if you want to survive in the world, you better start loving those eyes. All right.
Sure, exactly. Like we should. I mean, the thing is, like me telling you the story, like it's just because I know there's people who actually need to hear it, and it might make a difference for them. Even if it didn't, they at least maybe understand something from this, and I'm happy if they take away something from this. But in any case, like it's what you do after that. Like, what do you decide to do after you see somebody do that to somebody else in public, or what do you do with yourself after you have that experience? Are you gonna, like, I don't want people to like now start bashing other people of doing that, right? But I want them to be aware and conscious of themselves first. Self-awareness is so important. Being self-aware of how you judge people, because hey, humans, we're automatically like people who judge. Like no matter what, we always have judgments. Like in science, like we form a automatic impression of someone under like, I don't know, 3 seconds or something, right? So it's like something that's innate in us.
I think
But
3 to
then
30 seconds. There's even some
yeah,
songs
I don't
about
know
it,
the
but
exact
I can't
numbers.
remember what.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But like, you get the point. It's like we always have this innate response to judge someone, no matter like in what environment or experience we are in. And so after that, after we recognize that, what are we gonna do with that? Are we actually gonna take that action to like make fun of somebody? Or are we gonna recognize that internally and say, like calm that down and say, hey, we're actually all the same. We're literally all the same. Why are you having this judgment, right? It's not going to help. It's not going to help in any situation, right? So having that self-awareness and pre-checking it for yourself, I think in any situation is very important. And anything also just comes from you personally, and then you can also teach others as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Okay. The next question is not meant to be an insult or nor criticism to our Asian culture. But here's the thing. I've never been a fan of like the typical mindset, oh, don't confront people, don't be respectful. I've never been a fan of that. Maybe, well, I was a parachute kid. And so, well, when I was in my host country, I was quite bigger than most of the kids. And as I got older, uh, the situation kind of reversed as I actually have physical advantage over them. And while it was only a brief period of time, I don't think I was ever bullying them, but I do know that I can utilize my physical advantage to confront them regardless of their size. So that was maybe on me. But the thing is that even as an adult now, I've never been fond of that mindset to keep instilling is that, oh, don't confront them, because the thing is that this this thing has resulted in unwanted unwanted predicament. For one thing is that with Asians, there's always cases such as, for example, the model minority, or the fact that there's always some stereotypical depiction that is unfairly, and in fact it gives us a negative perception. And this has come to the time whereby there are times whereby we kind of been looked down in the eyes of the global world. So I actually want to ask though, if let's say I know it's not gonna be an easy topic, but if you can confront your parents back then about this, how this kind of traditional Asian upbringing in a European country has impacted you negatively. I mean, in a hypothetical situation, maybe you can come back to the past or something. How would you have told them about it? Is like, how would you have approached it? Because this is not going the older mindset. I mean, values has to be respected, but knowledge wise, you can't repeat what could have been done from our parents generation. For one thing, nowadays we don't aim to be doctors, lawyers, or engineers. We
Some
nowadays
may
be,
do so. Yeah.
sorry.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
saying some might still want to. Go
Oh, okay, never mind. I don't judge you if
on.
you want to. I mean, if you want to, by all means, hey, it's still your life, right? But the thing is that if let's say you can confront them back then, or maybe you somehow not talk to your mom in the past before giving birth to you or something, like what would you have told them regarding how should you have approached this? Because instill while the values that you instilled has made you an amazing young lady, at the same time the lessons that a mindset that they insisted that you grow up with has given you such kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a negative experience or if you want to call it a horrible memory, but it's definitely not a positive thing to remember, right?
Um, Actually, from my experience, I'm generally a person who's, I don't know, I would call myself an optimist. So I like to always think about what positives I kind of experience from that. So honestly, like if you were to ask me like how was their experience growing up as a Chinese person or somebody who grew up in Hungary, I would first think of like the positive stuff, right? And so I would say that I'm honestly very privileged to be in my position, and I wouldn't change it for the world to grow up in a different culture. I honestly love it that I am a Chinese born Hungarian. I always think about it, the example is my friends who are, perhaps, not Asian or Chinese, they would have like simple bread for breakfast. I don't know. They'd have, jam and butter for breakfast. And I'm like, oh my
We have
gosh,
rice. We have
I
rice.
what? Sorry?
Oh no, we have rice. No, I'm just trying to brag
You
in
have
it.
rice?
Never mind. Oh yeah, I
That's
used to eat rice
cool.
for breakfast.
That's
You
insane.
don't?
I've heard of that. That's pretty cool. No, but
You
no,
don't?
like in general, like the thing is like just like small things like that. I just feel so privileged that I have the benefit of experiencing at least the Chinese food culture, and having the benefit of the Chinese food culture with me, and having, for example, like noodles, or I don't know, like different pancakes or
Kanji,
youtiao, or yeah, kanji, like
tall,
for breakfast,
tall, yeah, okay.
馒头, 包子, gyoza, like all of these good things that give me so much food heaven. So like thinking about those small moments, I'm like, I'm so happy I grew up in an Asian household. Like, I would have never been, able to experience this fully in that extent. So I always try to look at the positives. And I would say also, like, in terms of like how I grew up in my household and the education and how my parents kind of raised me, is they gave me a lot of important insights that I'm super thankful for. And especially as right now I also work as an interculturalist, meaning I actually guide people and consult people on how to communicate, interact with people from different cultures. I think that has been really, really, really helpful, because I realized in a traditional Chinese setting how you should come across and what are the values that are different than the European ones, right? So, for example, them telling me that you shouldn't be so direct, you shouldn't be so confrontational, that actually has really helped me, because I could really see some people who are put into the very traditional Chinese context, or, for example, when I go back in the summer. Well, let's say a story. So basically, there was this story that happened when I was in, I don't know, I would say middle school, and I was back in China in the summer as usual. And we had like this huge gathering with like a lot of like people that we know, adults, like kids our age. And we were sitting around the round table as you do, like this, the restaurants. And what happened was, like, everybody is waiting to settle down, and the food was already on the table, right? But everybody was still like settling down and moving across and finding their seat. And this little kid who was my age, but also like, was born and raised in Europe, he just decided to like grab a food from the from the middle of the, the dishes.
Uh,
And if you're Asian, you know what that means, because the thing
yes,
is,
sir.
that's okay. So basically, try to break it down for you, is in Asian culture, like you always wait for the elderly to first,
Yes.
eat. Like that's like a very, very big value that we have, and it's also like directly directed towards hierarchy, which is, people who are older than you pay a lot of respect, you kind of give the best to them, and you always wait after they do an action, because they are the ones who kind of give approval. And so when that little kid didn't, he didn't really have any bad intention. He didn't know about this, I guess, or assume. And so he like took something. I don't know. It was like a chicken, Sichuan chicken, whatever it was. And he took it and he ate it. And then I could see like,
All the people are
her
judging you. Like,
mom. Yeah, his mom was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like she was apologizing, and I could see her blushing, and she was like very intimidated by what happened. And she was like, "Oh," like she was calling her son, I don't know, let's say Bob. "Oh, Bob, he doesn't have any manners. Like I'm sorry about this. Like usually this doesn't happen." She was trying to kind of like make up for it, because it's kind of breaking the unsaid laws of Chinese culture. And so moments like these, like I'm very happy that I was actually instilled in a traditional mindset of what are the unsaid values, and how to read the air, as people say, in Chinese culture, because that's how you communicate and interact with people properly for them to understand you. And if you break it, even though people won't say it directly to your face, especially in Asian culture, that you did something wrong, but people will remember it and they will recognize that behavior, right? They know that you did that. And that may really create a very unintended, but very unintended negative impact on your image, right? So in that case, I'm actually very thankful that I had both of these perspectives in my life. Yeah. But also talking about negatives, there's always negatives, and um, I don't. Okay, basically, like the negatives would more be like how I express myself, because I would say that I'm still more leaning towards like this American way of communicating. I am more direct, and I like to kind of say what's on my mind, and I kind of like to do things in my own way instead of like always being a collective group, which is what I kind of experience in Asian culture, which is sitting around the round table, being a more collectivist culture where you do everything together. When you go out to a restaurant, you always see somebody who's eating with somebody. Versus in Europe, it's completely normal to see somebody eating alone, right? So I in a way feel like I'm more leaning towards this, other
The
side of the culture.
individual, the Western mindset or the individualist mindset. I don't know if you want to call it that.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's individualism and collectivism. So
No, no worry. I'm also like that. I'm also like that.
yeah, yeah. So the thing is, like, I would then in that context have some clashes with communication, how I interact with my parents sometimes, because for me, like, maybe more my natural way of communication is rather more individualistic, which means that I kind of like to hold my own opinion. I really value independence of thought and also of action, and expressing myself, how I feel, and being honest with everything, and making sure people feel that I am genuine, authentic. That is very important for me. But when I do that in for example, like family gatherings or meeting with like another Chinese family, um my parents would, you know they would like say it to me like after we left, because another thing, you don't confront people on the spot. So and they would tell me like after, like, oh, Wei Rong, like, like that wasn't correct, right? Like next time you should do this because blah 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 blah. So there's moments always like that, and it kind of like gets me like a mindset reset, and it helps me in a way. But also I recognize, whoa, how cool actually that there's so many different like versions of what's proper in different cultures, and like there's no right or wrong, right? There's no right that, hey, individualism or being direct is cool, or hey, being indirect is not cool. There a way of how the culture has evolved the country and how the history has impacted that. So I in a way like to see it like they're different and there's no right or wrong. So I honestly appreciate this diversity and mindset perspective. Yeah. I don't hear you.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
I forgot to unmute my mic. Sorry about that.
don't worry.
Yeah, I think it's always good to be able to code switch, as in you know when and how to actually practice the right kind of custom for different kind of situation. And the thing is because yeah, as you said, like in that particular situation, had you known beforehand, then it would have been a lot more beneficial. I guess you wouldn't have embarrassed yourself or your own significant others. At the same time, there are certain traits. I mean, there's always positive and negative, right? To be fair,
Yeah, sure.
like for example, it's not an error in a sense to be able to express yourself more openly. That's something that I really wish that an Asian community is actually a lot more capable of, to be able to express your opinion, to voice out. This Recently, I created a concept called the Digital Culture Kits, which was created from my observation of my 3-year-old nephew who can speak Spanish for some reason, even though he's Bahasa, his Indonesian is still a little bit more gibberish because he's only 3, but somehow he knows a Spanish phrase and he learns English through imitating YouTube. So that was created with the intention to let people understand that, well, the world is growing in a sense, and the pandemic, it may have accelerated it to a certain extent, is because there's a generation that grew up using only technology as their medium to the world. So this is something that would be interesting. And I can't remember who said, was it Dr. Ruth, or I can't remember which, was it one of my past guests? I can't remember which one. But I think TCKs can actually be a studying template in an extent, is because this is how our lives are. And I hope that this is something that we can contribute to moving on.
For sure. And you touched upon a very important topic, which is, kids nowadays and even us growing up, we're surrounded by technology. And
That's yours. That's yours. I'm 7 years older than you. Back then
oh,
we only just started. We still using the dial-up system for our internet.
oh,
Yeah.
excuse me. Sorry about that. Right.
Wow.
In any case, like
Wow.
right now at least,
Seriously?
right now
Okay.
at least, we all use technology, and it'll be very weird and different if we don't have our phone, at least for, a lot of people next to us. And I feel like that has actually been more ways beneficial to cultural awareness and understanding, because we're able to, in a way, spread our message and our cultural customs in a much more easier format. People are much more easy to receive the information, and they are much more able to actually share the stuff. They feel much more open about it, right? And I feel like this conversation of culture is definitely becoming, in a way, more normalized than before through digital technology. And I think it's also like a route for us third culture kids, but also like non third culture kids to take, to kind of like bring out the message of the importance of identity and about multiculturality and even about monoculturality, because we have the benefit of really like listening to a million voices all across the world, hearing their experience that might be similar or a bit different, but in some way we can always connect, and being able to have that connection across, borders and across countries is something that's really magical. And it connects us humans to each other through this connection across borders. So honestly, I think it's a really beneficial thing in our era if we use it to its, right use. So of course that's like always an exception there, but in the best hopes, I'm sure we all use it in its best use.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. I only have two more questions for you.
Yeah.
So, this is something that, in a sense, well, it's more of a concept. If you can create a character or a medium for a show, of to explain the importance of intercultural mindset, what would it be?
Hmm. That's cool. That's a cool question. I
Yes, I know.
mean,
That's why you created it.
yes, self promotion. Anyway, so I, I would honestly just, I don't want to like do any like fancy production. At least like as of now, I might like regret saying this if perhaps something happens later on. But like as of right now, I would say
Never say never. Never say never.
exactly. So, that's why I kind of give you guys that little caution there. Anyway, so as of now, I just think that I really want people to kind of think of it as in its very true form, which is I'll potentially just like, I don't know, share my own life story, perhaps do like an autobiography of myself and share my story of growing up, perhaps doing a film, or if somebody else, doesn't matter if it's me or somebody
She
else.
says I'm promoting myself. Oh, the hypocrisy.
No, I mean, okay, whatever. If I'm promoting myself, that's also
Kidding,
fine.
I'm just kidding. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, anyway, so the whole idea is that I don't want to like create an artificial story or try to like do some any like crazy setup of like of what it's like being a TCK. I think it's just like any other human, and it's completely normal. And so I really want to emphasize the normality of it, and that it's something that it's a thing that is growing. There's much more TCKs than ever before, right? So it's something that should be really seen as, in a way, normal in our society. It should be much more accepted. And that's why I kind of thought about creating like a biography of myself. It's fine if I don't, Calvin, or somebody else. It doesn't, whoever. And just like breaking it down of just like the little moments they had when they grow up, because those are the true moments that audiences and viewers can really connect with, because they are authentic and they are about their story truly. So kind of making a documentary like, or adding some humor is always good, but just keeping it in its more like stripped back form is something that I have in mind. Yeah.
All right. For your last question is actually if people who are watching this who want to contribute to raw culture, or even they could just want to tune into your website to find out more about it, how can they go about it? Oh, and just I actually have attached the link to Wei Rong's raw culture Instagram page. It's in my description box. But yeah, maybe I will let the CEO herself to explain about her own startup.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Thank you, by the way, for this conversation so far. I'm really enjoying it. And honestly, I just feel like it's a discussion. So, anyway, so about raw culture, you can find it on almost every platform. Yeah, it's a lot. So basically, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Pinterest, on LinkedIn, and even on YouTube. It's called raw culture. For some, it's called join raw culture. But basically, you will find it if you type raw culture. So definitely check it out. There's already like a lot of like posts that I did, for example, with former TCKs, or for example, interviews that I've done with other people sharing about their cultural stories. Just feel free to check it out and comment on it. If you have any questions, feel free to DM us directly. I'll be very happy to explain anything or continue the conversation. And also, by the way, I recently just opened up a TCK community. And basically, what it is it's a community for TCKs around the age of 18 to 24. And the reason why I chose that age is because I realized that those are like one of the most crucial times for your development. And those are the times that I needed to really have this strong community of people like me who are TCKs, who are multicultural, and would like to have a support system where they can talk about growing up, as a TCK, and have that support where you can share your stories, your experiences, and know that there's somebody on the other side who is similar like you. So in any case, I created a platform, community for TCKs where they can share their cultural stories. And it's on the platform called Geneva. Basically, I think Calvin has it in the description of the post. You can just go on the link and you can download the application and answer a few questions, and you're there. And it's it's done. And you can join. And basically, it's a support system for TCKs, but also for non TCKs. If you want to get to know more about what third culture kids are, or get to know more about other cultures, it's also great way for you to be a part of that and listen to the stories shared there. So if you are a TCK yourself or you aren't, feel free to join. I'm very, very happy and would love to welcome you. And also, if you know anybody else who would benefit from this, please do share it. And I'm looking very forward to welcoming you to the group. Yes.